have you been an NTL member? When did you become a member?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. I became an NTL member in 1986. So I've been a member since 1986. I was in the onboarding sessions with Lennox Joseph and Pam Palanke North and Pauline Frederick Hicks, and Argentine was our onboard person, she and Earl Braxton. And oh my God, we had such a wonderful experience. It was amazing. We had a wonderful time. I became aware of NTL in the mid 80s. You know, I certainly was working with Charles Seashore, and he talked about NTL, and I was a fielding student, became a fielding student from an NTL experience. Actually, I was at the Safety Harbor Applied Behavioral Science Conference, and it was during the anti-apartheid movement. I was at Phillips Academy, and that's where I met, oh my goodness, I met Maria Ramos and Elsie Y. Cross, Carol Brantley, and I affectionately say to people all the time, and I was trotting behind Elsie, just soaking up information. That was the first time I met David Cooperrider and his conversation on appreciative inquiry. That's where I met Edwin Nichols and his conversation on culture. Randall Robinson was there. We had a really good session on anti-apartheid and the anti-apartheid movement. So it was an amazing conference. Safety Harbor, Florida. Wow. 1985.
Hey, thank you. Amazing. So Cathy, when you look back on from that time up till now, when you look back at your time with NTL, what stands out for you as a time when you felt most excited about your membership? So when you think of what stands out as a really, really good experience, made you feel connected and involved with NTL?
Well, you know, to really be honest with you, there are several. So I'm buffering to come up with an example. I think for me, the time that I was the most engaged and excited about my membership in NTL was when I had the wonderful responsibility of doing the diversity inquiry for NTL using appreciative inquiry. And we held our meeting and I gave my results in Annapolis, Maryland. And Jane Watkins, I'm sorry, Jane Magruder Watkins was the chair of the board, and Lennox Joseph was the executive director and CEO at that time. And we did interviews with as many members as possible. I remember Elsie Cross telling me, "Don't mess this up." And I said, "I won't, Elsie, I promise, I promise." So I've had some amazing mentors from parts of the NTL community. And I'm just ever so grateful for them. I have some wonderful friends from my time in NTL: Maria Ramos, Barbara Riley, Leroy Wells. Oh, Leroy and I used to have amazing conversations about justice, engagement, use of self. And I think so that was the one where I found myself, you know, coming into my own understanding of appreciative inquiry and the power of appreciative inquiry, and my understanding of organization development. And I felt I was ready to do that because I had been part of the first diversity work conference with Ted Schutte and Marianne Rainey and Lucia Edmonds, Haywood Martin, Rad Wilson. I can see us going around the room, Charlie Seashore, and we were all participants, and Jane and Lucia Edmonds and Carlos Grease and Haywood Martin were the facilitators. And we gave them a run for their money. Oh, we did. And so, from that point, the one thing that I feel I learned the most about human behavior and the behavioral sciences was from Lindy Sada. And I do tell people that I trotted around behind Lindy. I mean, I interned with him. I was his intern at the Professional Work Conference. And it was me, Ramia, not Maria Ramos, it was Jackie Bierce and Daisy Rios and Bob Wallace. And so when I talk about good friends, and those are people who still call and ask me, how are you doing? Bob and I affectionately chuckle and say we're going to go get our blood pressure checked together, So I can't say enough about Lindbergh and his professionalism around critical incidents and understanding group behavior. So I know we have lots of titans in the field, but there are some really unsung heroes in NTL. And I really hope we can cast a light on those contributions and begin to understand and honor the people who are making a difference as we go forward.
Yeah, wow, absolutely. So when you think about all those wonderful experiences, what do you think, what stands out as a value of the NTL community? What do you think is maybe the core value without which it just wouldn't be the same?
I think we speak a lot about our value of social justice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying close attention to that right now, Meta, because I'm wondering where we are in our core value of social justice and the elimination of racism. I think that is a core value, and I think that's a value that's real, it's very elusive in terms of looking at the power and privilege that we must investigate when we think about that as a core value. And I think NTL does a rough edge job of looking at that. And when I say rough edge, it's like sandpaper on silk. And so we work at it, and we talk about it, and we work at it, and we create policy around it. And then the living of that core value is where we have to live into that value. And so that's one. But the one that I think for me is really important also is the engagement, the contact with another human, the applied in terms of behavioral sciences. We are a practitioner program. We look at the behavior. And for me, if we lose that belief around the behavioral sciences and the contact boundary, as John Carter taught me, that you have to stay in that contact boundary. And so that's important. That is for me, that's a core value in NTL, that staying at that contact boundary, staying in dialogue with each other. And it's raw and it's messy, um, and I think that for me, I've learned to be uh, a professional in understanding that. I think that that's one of the things that's been a gift to me from NTL, is to look at that contact boundary and what happens when we pay attention to the behaviors that create racism or create inclusion or create exclusion or create power, and that power vacuum that comes when one group has power and the other groups are excluded or targeted or impacted. And what is the behavior
Yeah, yeah,
that we need to engage in to make that change?
sure, sure. So in terms of yourself, what do you value about your work?
Well, I have two taglines in my work that speak about who I see myself as in the world. And one of them is, if you don't want to change the world, you shouldn't have called me. And so I value my belief that we can change the world. And I believe that I am that change agent. I don't believe I'm the only change agent that can do that, but I believe I am a change agent who can change the world. And the other one is co-creating the world we deserve, or co-creating the change we deserve to see in the world. So one of my values that I say to my friends, and I say all the time, is, you know me, my story has not changed. And so that consistent belief in the movement, the pacing, the work for justice. You know, I grew up in a social justice family. I grew up at the table with, well, first my dad, but then my dad's friends were Reverend C.L. Franklin, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend John Smedler, Reverend Ralph David Abernathy. So those were the people that sat at my mom's kitchen table when I was 12, 11, 10, planning things. And my dad was one of those people that said, we are not spending our money in places where we are not welcome. So he actually had us where we could not go to certain places. And, you know, as a girl, you want to go to the new shop. You want to go to the Bonwit Teller. You want to go to the new Nordstrom's. You know, I'm a Nordy. And my dad would say, you're not crossing Warren Avenue to do anything. If you can't spend your dollar in Detroit, then you can't spend the dollar. We're not spending our dollars in Southfield. We're not spending our dollars in Dearborn until they welcome us into Dearborn and they welcome us into Southfield. So it was that life that my brothers and sisters and I grew up in. And it was the integrity of watching those men die for justice. So I live my father and I live my mom. My mom, first of all, my mom managed my dad. So that right there was a Nobel Prize winning experience. But my mom was also a social justice advocate. She was an advocate for children in foster care. And she taught me the strength that I've been able to manifest to be a part of the human trafficking rescue network. So, you know me. my story has not changed. And I believe that we can change the world. And I watched my parents, I watched my parents, I watched their friends do things on the ground that never really garnered a lot of attention, but absolutely changed the world.
Yeah. So in terms of, you have this incredible wealth of experience and knowledge and an incredible background as well. What do you value about your own contribution to NTL?
I think that I have contributed significant programs to NTL. I think Michael Brazel, myself, Delight Frost, and Rick Huntley, John Jenkins created an awesome program on understanding the use of self in terms of the Diversity Practitioner Certificate Program. Marcella Benson Quazina, we put together a staff that was just top notch. And I believe our program, the Diversity Practitioner Certificate Program, was the first program that took participants into an international community. We went to Brazil, we went to Trinidad and Tobago. We looked at social justice and inequities at both the individual level, the group, the systems, and the cultural levels. And we have not done a program like that since. And I think that that program has laid the foundation for even the resistance that is present in how NTL talks about equity and inclusion. And we keep expanding the language and the language and the language, but we have not changed the behavior. And I think that was one. And I also think that our programs on appreciative inquiry were very significant in NTL. And I'm both proud and humbled. So without being humble, I am proud to say that in collaboration with colleagues, we co-created 2 amazing programs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so how do we keep this going, Cathy? What are the, so with these amazing programs, and I agree with you, and I wish there were more of them, a repeat. What the wishes that you have for NTL for moving forward with all that experience and all that good stuff? So facing the future, what are the wishes that you have? You can have more than 2.
Thank you, Meta. I think that, you know, Charlie C. Shore used to say to me, if you stir it up in here, you're stirring it up out there, and what's out there is in here. So NTL is a microcosm of what else is going on in the world, as well as NTL is putting out into the world things that are troubling or things that are exciting and challenging for us. I think one of the things that we're going to need to do is to figure out what we want to offer in our programs and hold to that line. And one of my wishes is that we would return to some of our educational programs as well as our community programs. You know, I'm a community activist, and I really think that that's going to be something that's very important for us. I think that our culture, so a gift is to return to our educational programs, to return to our community activist programs. I'm the last appointed Ken Benny Scholar, and I take that appointment very seriously. It was myself, Dick and Marion Vitito before me, and Lynn Hirsch was the first. And each one of them, or each one of us, talked about being connected to the community. And I think that's the thing that when I say a manifestation of a dream, when I'm thinking about the 75th Jubilee, the manifestation of the dream for me was what I started as a Ken Benny scholar. And that was making NTL accessible to the community, and not just the paying community, because that's not the community that is always impacted by racism and sexism, but that group of community activists who are part of my Anyhow Women's program, where they get things done anyhow, without money, sometimes without education. You know, I take Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer as one of my ancestral mothers. And Mrs. Hamer was a sharecropper from Mississippi. You know, Jane and I used to talk about that interesting dynamic that made us friends, her from the plantation owning Magruders and me from the enslaved Africans of Alabama. So two Southern women coming up in 10 years apart in age, but really daughters of the South. And the idea that still in the United States of America, sometimes spelled with a K, there are still communities who are working on voting, who are working on food deserts, who are working on Black farmers. One of the women that I love the most in the world, so I'm going to call her name, is Mrs. Dorothy Barker, who is a Black farmer, Black farm woman. They've been on their land for 3 generations and have watched white America take their land from them. And so those are the people I want to impact. And by saying that the Jubilee is open to all, you know, pay what you can, I say to my students, give me $750, give me $1,750, give me $750, however, but it's available to you. That bevy of scholars and practitioners that we put together for the Jubilee, it's just breathtaking to me to see that dream come true that I wrote about as a Ken Benny scholar. So 25 years later, so to use a phrase that I learned in South Africa, Meta, you know, time longer than rope. And so the idea of just being able to say, open the door and let the community in. Open the door and let the folks who are the soil of the earth in. That for me is something that I will work for in any organization that I'm in going forward, because without the community, without the bedrock, beautiful people who work every day for the lives and freedom of others, you know, we can hold all the degrees we want to Dr. Jacobs Court. You know.
Yeah, this is so true, Cathy, and you for one. I mean, if it wasn't for you, I don't think this Jubilee would have taken off. But we're going there. And interesting, making things available to the wider public. And that's probably, agree with you, an area that's make it possible for people to attend who can't afford $3,000. And there are many of those.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those.
To learn things. I mean, and for me, I can't tell you what I've learned from the women and men that I work with on the quote unquote workhouse floor that make me a better scholar, make me a better practitioner, make me a better social activist, and make me much more committed to calling their names or speaking for them, as Louise Diamond would remind us, in the 4 levels of truth, of trust. That for me is what I want for NTL in the future going forward.
That's wonderful, Cathy. Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to put in here now that we have this interview, and an important interview in the 75th Jubilee. Anything that you would like to add to what you already said?
In terms of my core values or my beliefs about NTL, I think that one of our strengths is moving into an understanding that we are at one level scientists. Everyone in NTL is not a scientist, and nor do they have to be. But I think that it's also going to be very important, a tip of the hat to Kate Cowie, to continue to do research and to write up our research, to really talk about social justice, talk about structural inequality, bring people to the table for dialogues around that. And for me, I think we're going to have to start telling the truth about what's going on internationally around racism, and begin to peel back those levels of privilege that we sit on or sit in. So those are hopes for me. And my hope is, and this is a hope for me, this is a hope for NTL, that we can figure out a way to stop having so many generational conversations that are acerbic and adversarial. You know, I grew up in a culture, again, where the wisdom of those who had tread before me, the ancestors, was valued. And I also grew up in that same community of people who loved young people and thought that their enthusiasm and their ability to soak in knowledge was so important. So, I guess, Meta, I'm still a village girl, where when you, I'm still a village girl, Alabama, Lagos, Ibadan, Detroit, I'm still a village girl.